And that, class, concludes our lecture on the digestive systems of Class 3 planet inhabitants, Professor Zix9 announced, his tentacles waving in what passed for excitement among the Silorbians. Any questions before we move on to our next topic? The classroom of alien students sat in various states of attentiveness, some with multiple eyes drooping, others furiously taking notes with their appendages. One student, however, had all 7 of her eye stalks pointed directly at the professor, quivering with barely contained curiosity. Yes, Blorka, the professor sighed, knowing full well that this particular student's questions often led them down rabbit holes that would make an earthling's head spin. Blorka's gelatinous form jiggled as she spoke, her voice coming out in a series of bubbles and pops. Professor, I've been doing some extracurricular research on Class 5 planet inhabitants, specifically those from Earth, and I came across something. The rest of the class groaned in unison, a sound not unlike 1,000 balloons slowly deflating. Professor Zix9's tentacles drooped slightly, but he nodded for Blorka to continue. Well, she bubbled excitedly, it seems that these humans regularly consume a substance called coffee. From what I've gathered, it's essentially liquid rocket fuel. The classroom erupted in a cacophony of alien laughter, each species expressing mirth in their own unique way. Some chittered, others honked, and a few in the back simply vibrated at an alarming frequency. Professor Zix9 waved his tentacles for silence. Now, class. While I'm sure Blorka's research is interesting, I highly doubt that any sentient species would willingly ingest rocket fuel. Perhaps you misunderstood something in your readings. Blorka's form rippled indignantly. But Professor, I triple-checked my sources. They described this coffee as a dark, bitter liquid that humans consume to increase their energy levels and cognitive function. It contains a stimulant called caffeine that affects their nervous system. Some humans even claim they can't function without it. The professor's color shifted from a calm blue to a skeptical purple. That does sound rather far-fetched, Blorka. Are you sure this isn't some sort of human joke? They are known for their peculiar sense of humor. Oh, but it gets better, Blorka continued, her enthusiasm causing small bubbles to form and pop around her. Apparently, humans have entire establishments dedicated to the consumption of this substance. They call them coffee shops, and they're everywhere. At this point, a spindly, insectoid student named Zizix raised one of his many limbs. Professor, if I may interject, I've also come across mentions of this coffee in my studies of human culture. It seems to be a central part of their daily rituals. Professor Zix9's tentacles twisted into what could only be described as the Silorbian equivalent of a facepalm. Very well, he sighed. Since it seems we've ventured into this topic, let's explore it further. Blorka, what else can you tell us about this alleged rocket fuel that humans drink? Blorka's form practically vibrated with excitement. Well, according to my research, humans often consume this beverage in the morning to wake up. Some even claim they're not human until they've had their first cup of coffee. The class erupted in laughter again, this time with a mix of disbelief and amusement. Are you suggesting, drawled Gloops, a slug-like student from the gaseous planet Nebulox VI, that humans turn into some other life form overnight and need this coffee to transform back? Blorka's eye stalk swiveled towards Gloops. Don't be ridiculous, Gloops. It's obviously a figure of speech, though with humans one can never be too sure. Professor Zix9 interjected, his color now a mix of curious yellow and skeptical purple. Let's not get carried away with wild speculations. Blorka, do you have any concrete data on the effects of this substance? Oh yes, Blorka bubbled. According to human medical studies, this caffeine increases alertness, improves concentration, and can even enhance physical performance. Some humans report feeling jittery or anxious if they consume too much. A collective gasp rippled through the classroom. But that sounds like a drug, exclaimed Photon, a bioluminescent student from a deep-sea world. Exactly, Blorka agreed. And get this, it's completely legal and socially acceptable on Earth. Humans consume it in massive quantities every single day. The classroom descended into chaos as students began chattering excitedly among themselves, each trying to wrap their various appendages around this bizarre concept. Professor Zix9 flashed a bright red, signaling for quiet. All right, settle down everyone. While this is certainly intriguing, we must remember that Class 5 planets like Earth are classified as Deathworlds for a reason. Their inhabitants have evolved to survive in conditions that would be lethal to most of us. But Professor Zizix buzzed, doesn't this prove that humans are even more resilient than we thought? I mean, they're essentially running on rocket fuel. The professor's tentacles twisted in exasperation. Zix, please don't exaggerate. I'm sure this coffee isn't actually rocket fuel. Though I must admit, the concept is fascinating from a xenobiological perspective. Blorka, sensing an opportunity, quickly interjected. Professor, what if we could get a human to come and explain this to us directly? Wouldn't that be an incredible learning experience for the class? The suggestion sent a ripple of excitement through the room. Even Professor Zix9 seemed intrigued, his color shifting to a thoughtful green. That's Not a terrible idea, Blorka, he admitted, but arranging such a visit would be complicated. Humans are a protected species, and their exposure to other galactic civilizations is strictly regulated, but it's not impossible. Right, Blorka pressed, her eye stalks quivering with hope. The professor sighed, a sound like air escaping from a balloon. I suppose I could put in a request with the Galactic Educational Exchange Program. No promises, mind you, but it might be possible to arrange a supervised visit from a human expert. The classroom erupted in cheers, each student expressing their excitement in their own unique way. Blorka's entire form rippled with joy, while Zizix's wings buzzed so fast he accidentally levitated a few inches off his seat. Now, Professor Zix9 cautioned, his tentacles waving for calm. Even if we do manage to arrange this, I expect you all to be on your best behavior. Remember, humans are not used to interacting with such a diverse group of species. We don't want to overwhelm them. Gloops raised a slimy pseudopod. Professor, if a human does visit, can we offer them some coffee? I'm curious to see this transformation they undergo firsthand. The class burst into laughter again, and even Professor Zix9's tentacles curled in amusement. Let's not get ahead of ourselves, Gloops, he chuckled. First, we need to see if we can even arrange a visit. And if we do, we'll need to be careful about what we expose the human to. Their physiology is quite different from ours, after all. Blorka could barely contain her excitement. Oh, this is going to be amazing. Just think of all the questions we can ask. Like, why do they really need this coffee to function? What happens if they don't get their daily dose? Can they overdose on it? Do they? Blorka, the professor interrupted gently. Let's take this one step at a time. For now, why don't you compile a list of the most important questions we should ask if we do get a human visitor? And the rest of you, he addressed the class, I want you to do some research on human biology and culture. If we're going to host a human, we need to be prepared. The students nodded enthusiastically, already whispering among themselves about what they hoped to learn. As the excitement in the classroom gradually settled, Professor Zix9 couldn't help but feel a mix of anticipation and trepidation. Humans were known throughout the galaxy as one of the most unpredictable and resilient species. If what Blorka said about this coffee was true, who knew what other surprises they might have in store? All right, class, he announced. I'll submit the request for a human visitor today. In the meantime, let's get back to our regular curriculum. Now, who can tell me about the digestive system of a Jovian gas dweller? As the lesson resumed, Blorka could hardly focus. Her mind was racing with thoughts of the potential human visitor. Little did she know, her innocent question about coffee was about to spark an interstellar incident that would go down in the annals of both human and alien history. 2 standard galactic weeks later, the class of Professor Zix9 was buzzing with excitement. The Galactic Educational Exchange Program had approved their request, and a human expert was scheduled to visit their classroom that very day. Now remember, class, Professor Zix9 cautioned, his tentacles twitching nervously. Our guest is a respected ixonobiologist named Dr. Emma Rodriguez. She's here to educate us about human biology and culture, not to be treated like some sort of sideshow attraction. Blorka, who had been vibrating so intensely she was in danger of liquefying entirely, managed to compose herself long enough to ask, "But Professor, can we still ask her about coffee?" The professor sighed, a sound like air escaping from a deflating balloon. "Yes, Blorka, you can ask about coffee, but please try to be respectful and scientific in your inquiries." Just then, a soft chime announced the arrival of their guest. The classroom door slid open with a hiss, revealing a human female in a crisp white lab coat. Dr. Rodriguez stepped into the room, her eyes widening as she took in the diverse array of alien students before her. "Greetings, everyone," she said, her voice steady despite the unusual circumstances. "I'm Dr. Emma Rodriguez, and I'm here to answer your questions about human biology and culture." The class stared in awe. For many of them, this was their first time seeing a human in the flesh. Dr. Rodriguez, to her credit, maintained a professional demeanor as she made her way to the front of the classroom. Professor Zix9 extended a tentacle in greeting. "Welcome, Dr. Rodriguez. We're honored to have you here. I hope you don't mind, but my students are particularly curious about a certain aspect of human culture." Dr. Rodriguez raised an eyebrow. "Oh, and what might that be?" Before the professor could respond, Blorka's enthusiasm got the better of her. "Is it true that humans run on rocket fuel?" she blurted out, her form quivering with excitement. Dr. Rodriguez blinked in surprise, then let out a laugh. "Rocket fuel? I'm not sure I understand." Professor Zix9's tentacles twisted in embarrassment. "I apologize, Dr. Rodriguez. What Blorka means is, well, we've heard about a substance called coffee that humans consume regularly. Some of my students have drawn some rather interesting conclusions about its properties." Understanding dawned on Dr. Rodriguez's face, followed quickly by amusement. "Ah, I see. Well, I can assure you that humans don't actually run on rocket fuel. But I'd be happy to explain more about coffee and its role in human society." The class leaned forward eagerly, each student focused intently on the human before them. Dr. Rodriguez cleared her throat. Coffee is indeed a popular beverage among humans. It contains a stimulant called caffeine, which can increase alertness and improve concentration. Many humans drink it in the morning to help them wake up and start their day. Zix raised one of his many limbs. But why would humans need such a substance? Don't you naturally wake up when your solar cycle begins? Dr. Rodriguez chuckled. Well, yes, we do wake up naturally. But many humans find that coffee helps them feel more alert and ready to face the day. It's become a cultural ritual as much as a biological need. Gloops oozed forward slightly. Is it true that humans claim they're not human until they've had their coffee? Are you some sort of different species before you drink it? This time, Dr. Rodriguez couldn't contain her laughter. No, that's just a figure of speech. We don't actually transform or anything. It's just a way of saying that we don't feel fully awake or functional until we've had our coffee. Blorpka's eye stalks quivered with curiosity, but from what we've read, the effects of this caffeine sound quite intense. Increased heart rate, heightened alertness, even anxiety in large doses. How is this not considered a dangerous drug? Dr. Rodriguez nodded thoughtfully. That's a fair question. Caffeine is indeed a stimulant, and it can have those effects. However, for most humans, when consumed in moderation, the benefits outweigh the risks. It's been a part of our culture for centuries, and we've developed a tolerance for it. Professor Zix9 interjected, his color shifting to a curious yellow. Fascinating. So humans have essentially adapted to regularly consuming a stimulant. From an evolutionary perspective, that's quite remarkable. I suppose it is, Dr. Rodriguez agreed, though I'd never really thought about it that way before. It's just such a normal part of our daily lives. Photon's bioluminescent body pulsed with excitement. Do all humans consume this coffee? And how much do you typically drink? Dr. Rodriguez shook her head. Not all humans drink coffee. Some prefer tea, which also contains caffeine but usually in lower amounts. Others avoid caffeine altogether. As for how much, it varies greatly. Some humans might have 1 cup a day, while others might drink several. Several, Blorpka exclaimed, her form rippling in shock. But wouldn't that be dangerous? Dr. Rodriguez smiled reassuringly. For most humans, drinking several cups of coffee a day isn't harmful. We build up a tolerance to caffeine over time. However, consuming too much can lead to negative side effects like jitters, anxiety, or trouble sleeping. Zedzix buzzed thoughtfully. It almost sounds like humans are constantly walking a tightrope between stimulation and overstimulation. How do you manage it? That's actually a pretty accurate description, Doctor, Rodriguez admitted, looking impressed. It's all about finding the right balance for each individual. Some humans are more sensitive to caffeine than others. Professor Zix9's tentacles curled in fascination. Dr. Rodriguez, from a biological standpoint, how does this caffeine actually work in the human body? Dr. Rodriguez's eyes lit up at the chance to delve into the science. Excellent question. Caffeine works by blocking a neurotransmitter called adenosine. Adenosine normally builds up in our brains throughout the day, making us feel tired. By blocking it, caffeine keeps us feeling alert. It also stimulates the production of adrenaline, which is why it can increase heart rate and make us feel more energetic. The class listened in rapt attention, some taking furious notes, others simply staring in awe at the human before them. Blorpka, ever curious, bubbled up another question. But if coffee is so important to humans, why isn't it classified as a necessary nutrient? Why isn't it included in human ration packs or emergency supplies? Dr. Rodriguez chuckled. While many humans might argue that coffee should be considered a necessary nutrient, it's not actually essential for our survival. We can function without it, even if some of us might be a bit grumpier in the morning. As for emergency supplies, caffeine tablets are sometimes included, but they're not a priority compared to water, food, and medical supplies. Gloops oozed forward again, his slimy form glistening under the classroom lights. You mentioned that some humans get grumpy without coffee. What exactly does that mean? Do humans become aggressive or dangerous without their daily dose of rocket fuel? The class tittered at Gloops's persistent use of the term rocket fuel, causing Dr. Rodriguez to smile indulgently. No, we don't become dangerous, she explained, her tone a mix of amusement and patience. When we say grumpy, we mean irritable or in a bad mood. Some humans who are used to having coffee every day might experience headaches or fatigue if they don't have it. This is due to caffeine withdrawal, but it's temporary and not harmful. Professor Zix9's tentacles wiggled in what seemed to be the Zixylobian equivalent of a thoughtful nod. Fascinating. It sounds like humans have developed a rather complex relationship with this substance. That's a very astute observation, Professor Doctor. Rodriguez agreed. Coffee has indeed become deeply ingrained in many human cultures. It's not just about the caffeine for many, it's a social ritual, a comfort, or even a form of art. Photon's bioluminescent body pulsed rapidly, indicating excitement. Art. How can a beverage be art? Dr. Rodriguez's eyes lit up at the question. Oh, in many ways. There's an entire profession dedicated to preparing and serving coffee called baristas. They create intricate designs in the foam of certain coffee drinks, and some even compete in latte art competitions. Then there's the art of roasting coffee beans, blending different varieties to create unique flavor profiles. She trailed off, noticing the blank looks on many of the alien faces. I'm sorry, I might be getting a bit too detailed. The point is, coffee is more than just a stimulant for humans. It's a significant part of our culture. Blorka, who had been uncharacteristically quiet for a few moments, suddenly bubbled up with renewed vigor. Dr. Rodriguez, you said earlier that humans build up a tolerance to caffeine over time. Does that mean you need to keep increasing your intake to get the same effect? Is there a risk of addiction? The human scientist nodded approvingly at the insightful question. That's a great point, Blorka. Yes, humans can build up a tolerance to caffeine, which means they might need to consume more to get the same stimulating effect. And while caffeine isn't addictive in the same way as some drugs, people can become dependent on it. Zix's antennae twitched curiously. Dependent. What happens if a human who regularly consumes coffee suddenly stops? Well, Dr. Rodriguez began, her tone becoming more serious. Sudden caffeine withdrawal can lead to symptoms like headaches, fatigue, irritability, and difficulty concentrating. These symptoms usually last for a few days to a week, and they're not dangerous, just uncomfortable. Professor Zix9's color shifted to a concerned shade of blue. It sounds like this coffee has quite a hold on your species, Dr. Rodriguez. Are there any long-term health concerns associated with its consumption? The human scientist took a moment to consider her response. That's a complex question, Professor. The effects of long-term coffee consumption have been studied extensively in human medicine. Some studies suggest that moderate coffee consumption might have health benefits, like a reduced risk of certain diseases. However, excessive consumption can lead to problems like insomnia, anxiety, and digestive issues. The class murmured amongst themselves, each species expressing concern or fascination in their own unique way. Gloops, ever the skeptic, oozed forward once more. If this substance has such powerful effects, why isn't it more strictly regulated? Surely your governments must be concerned about its impact on society. Dr. Rodriguez couldn't help but laugh at this. I'm sorry, she said, composing herself. It's just that the idea of regulating coffee seems so absurd from a human perspective. Coffee has been a part of our culture for centuries. There have been attempts to ban or regulate it at various points in history, but they've never been successful or lasted long. Blorka's eye stalks quivered with excitement. Oh, coffee has a controversial history. Please tell us more. The human scientist grinned, clearly enjoying the class's enthusiasm. Well, coffee has indeed had its share of controversy. In the 16th century, it was banned in Mecca because it was believed to stimulate radical thinking. In the 18th century, King Frederick the Great of Prussia tried to ban it because he was worried about the economic impact of importing coffee instead of using local beer. The class erupted in a cacophony of alien laughter and exclamations of disbelief. You mean humans had to choose between stimulants? Zix buzzed incredulously. Between a liquid that makes you more alert and one that makes you less alert. Dr. Rodriguez nodded, her smile widening. Exactly. Humans have a complex relationship with various substances that affect our brain chemistry. But that's probably a topic for another lecture entirely. Professor Zix9's tentacles waved for silence as the class's excited chatter grew louder. All right, settle down everyone. We don't want to overwhelm our guest. He turned to Dr. Rodriguez, his color shifting to an apologetic purple. I hope you don't mind all these questions about coffee, Dr. Rodriguez. I assure you we are interested in other aspects of human biology and culture as well. The human scientist shook her head, still smiling. Not at all, Professor. I find it fascinating to see our culture through your eyes. It's making me think about aspects of human behavior that I've always taken for granted. Blorka, unable to contain herself any longer, suddenly blurted out, Dr. Rodriguez, did you have coffee today? Are you currently under its influence? The class fell silent, all eyes or equivalent sensory organs fixed on the human scientist. Dr. Rodriguez blinked in surprise, then burst into laughter. You know what? I didn't have my usual morning coffee today because I was so excited about this visit, she admitted. I was worried about being too jittery. But now I'm starting to wish I could use the extra energy to keep up with all your fantastic questions. The class buzzed with excitement at this revelation. Gloops oozed forward eagerly. So you're saying you're not at full human capacity right now? Fascinating. Can we observe you consume some coffee and document the effects? Professor Zix9's tentacles twisted in embarrassment. Gloops, that's hardly an appropriate request. Dr. Rodriguez is our guest, not a test subject. But to everyone's surprise, Dr. Rodriguez looked intrigued. You know what? Why not? It could be an interesting demonstration. Plus, I really could use a cup right about now. Do we have any way to brew coffee here? The professor's color cycled through a range of hues before settling on a resigned yellow. I suppose we could synthesize some using the molecular replicator in the lab next door. But Dr. Rodriguez, are you sure about this? The human scientist nodded enthusiastically. Absolutely. It's not every day I get to participate in an interspecies coffee experiment. Just promise me you won't try to drink any yourselves. Caffeine could be dangerous for your physiologies. As Professor Zix9 reluctantly went to prepare the coffee, the class could hardly contain their excitement. Blorka was vibrating so intensely she was in danger of splitting into multiple smaller Blorkas. Oh, this is so exciting, she bubbled. We're going to witness the human transformation firsthand. Dr. Rodriguez chuckled. Now, let's not get carried away. You're not going to see any dramatic changes. The effects of coffee are subtle. Zix buzzed curiously. But how will we measure the effects? Should we monitor your vital signs? Your cognitive function? Those are good ideas, Dr. Rodriguez nodded approvingly. We could do a simple reaction time test before and after I drink the coffee. As for vital signs, do you have any equipment that can monitor human physiology? Before anyone could respond, Professor Zix9 returned, carefully carrying a steaming mug of dark liquid. The class watched in fascinated silence as he handed it to Dr. Rodriguez. The human scientist took the mug, inhaling deeply. Ah, that smells pretty good for synthesized coffee. Thank you, Professor. She took a sip, then smiled. Not bad at all. Now, let's set up those tests while we wait for the caffeine to take effect. What followed was a flurry of activity as the class eagerly prepared to document the effects of coffee on their human guest. Blorka volunteered to time Dr. Rodriguez's reactions to visual stimuli, while Zid6 figured out how to adapt their medical scanner to human physiology. As they waited for the coffee to take effect, Dr. Rodriguez fielded more questions from the class. So, Dr. Rodriguez Photon pulsed curiously, are there any other substances humans regularly consume that might seem strange to non-humans? The scientist thought for a moment. Well, alcohol is another widely consumed substance that affects our brain chemistry. Unlike coffee, it's a depressant rather than a stimulant. Then there's chocolate, which contains a milder stimulant than coffee. Oh, and some humans eat extremely spicy foods that cause a burning sensation purely for enjoyment. The class stared at her in a mix of horror and fascination. You deliberately consume things that cause pain. Gloops oozed incredulously. Dr. Rodriguez laughed. It's not exactly pain, more like intense sensation. But yes, some humans really enjoy it. Incredible, Professor Zix9 marveled, his tentacles waving in amazement. Humans truly are remarkable in their ability to adapt to and even enjoy substances that would be considered harmful by many species. As they continued to chat, Dr. Rodriguez began to feel the familiar effects of the coffee kicking in. Her eyes seemed brighter, her movements more energetic. All right, she announced, I think the coffee's starting to take effect. Shall we run those tests again? The class watched in awe as Dr. Rodriguez demonstrated slightly faster reaction times and increased alertness. Her heart rate had increased slightly, and she seemed more animated in her responses. Fascinating, Blorka bubbled, her eye stalks quivering with excitement. So this is the power of human rocket fuel. Dr. Rodriguez chuckled. I hope this demonstration helps you understand that while coffee is important to many humans, it's not some magical transformation potion. It's just a mild stimulant that helps us feel more alert and focused. Professor Zix9's color shifted to an impressed shade of blue. Thank you, Dr. Rodriguez. This has been an incredibly enlightening experience for all of us. I believe my students will never look at human behavior the same way again. As the class began to wind down, the students chatted excitedly among themselves, each processing what they had learned in their own unique way. Blorka oozed up to Dr. Rodriguez, her form rippling with barely contained enthusiasm. Dr. Rodriguez, thank you so much for this amazing demonstration. You've inspired me to learn even more about human culture. The human scientist smiled warmly. I'm glad to hear that, Blorka. Curiosity and the desire to understand other species are crucial in fostering interstellar cooperation and friendship. As Dr. Rodriguez prepared to leave, Professor Zix9 addressed the class one final time. I hope you all realize how fortunate we were to have this opportunity. Let this be a lesson in the importance of approaching other cultures with an open mind and a willingness to learn. The students murmured in agreement, their various appendages and sensory organs focused on their human guest. Dr. Rodriguez gave a final wave to the class. Thank you all for your fascinating questions and your warm welcome. Remember, the universe is full of wonders, and sometimes those wonders come in the form of a simple cup of coffee. As she left the classroom, The excited buzz of conversation rose behind her. Little did Dr. Rodriguez know, her visit had not only educated a class of alien students, but had also sparked a galactic curiosity about human culture that would persist for generations to come. In the years that followed, the great caffeinated conundrum, as it came to be known, would be referenced in countless xenobiology textbooks across the galaxy. It served as a reminder that even the most ordinary aspects of one species' daily life could be a source of wonder and fascination to another. And somewhere in the vast expanse of space, in a classroom full of curious alien students, the legend of human rocket fuel lived on, forever changing the way the galaxy viewed those strange, resilient creatures from the little blue planet called Earth.